Buddy, good evening. Sorry we're running a couple minutes late. Welcome to the Lake Bluff School District 65 Board of Education Committee of the Whole meeting for April 11th, 2017. Leanne, can we please have a roll call?
Sure. Haig.
Present.
Hood.
Present.
Ryder.
Present.
Barry.
Here.
Morozen.
Present.
Charlotte, yes. Julie Gottschall.
Present.
So that's 6 presents and 1 here, and we're good. So we have a quorum. We can come to begin our meeting. We had a closed session prior, and we're now going to ask if everybody join me, and we will say pledge allegiance together. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We will now offer the opportunity for anybody in the audience who would like to call in and address the board, or if anybody would like to address the board at the podium, feel free to do so. If not, note that we'll have a section at the very end of the meeting where we ask for public comment again. So if you'd like to wait, that's fine. Not seeing anybody rushing to the podium, we will move on to item 5, where we have the addition of a discussion item, where every month we offer the opportunity for board members or administrators to offer a new topic for a future agenda, or to give us some kind of topic for discussion that's relevant for today. I believe Dr. Sophie has something to share.
I do. As we've discussed at previous board meetings, it is very necessary for our policy committee to reconvene and review our policy manual and policies in regards to student safety, preventing situations that occurred here with the teacher from the 1980s, make sure everything is airtight. Those involved on our policy committee are Julie, Susan, and Leanne, as well as our administrative team, including our principals. I have secured a third-party retired attorney whose specialty area is student issues and policies, who will help us scrutinize these existing policies and ensure that we will have them very tight and written as effectively as we can in order to enforce them to the very utmost. As soon as I get dates from that outside party, which I've emailed her and asked for dates, I will be scheduling a policy committee meeting in May for policy committee members, administrators, because our principals will need to be there, and obviously anybody else who wants to attend. We will do that either through a doodle, which is an online program, or we'll do it right at our meeting here in 2 weeks. As important as this effort is and will be, I think it's important that when we get the date, at minimum, we announce the meeting publicly. We post the meeting like we always do, and then we secure videotaping, possibly even getting this room to make it available so people can hear our discussions and be informed. Obviously, if we can get it to run live on the cable channel, that's a plus, but that's not always a promise. Is there anything else that we need to think about? Because the policy committee will be presenting to the board on their work, but probably 2 to 3 meetings that will all be public.
I recall a meeting or 2 ago referencing the petition that we've seen regarding this issue and being interested in making that part of our review to make sure that we go through the petition and address each of those issues. Whether or not we can adopt all of them or not, we'd at least take them under consideration.
And just to be clear, this is an open meeting, right? The policy meeting, so the public will be invited to be posted. And I know you said that it's logistically not always possible to broadcast live, but we will videotape no matter what.
Right. And we will
the
try
policy
to get it
meetings,
live.
I'm sorry. The policy meetings are always open.
Yes.
Just if people want, those are always posted. People have always been able to come to those if there's interest, which there hasn't been a stampede, but we welcome anyone who would like to observe.
So I'll have more on that, maybe in the next week. As soon as I get dates, I'll float them by. And then at the next meeting, we can at least publicly announce it and get it on calendars. So.
Anybody else have anything they want to add for a future agenda item or anything like that? We've got some stuff in the queue, but anything else has come up? If you think of something later, you can always email me or Jim. All right, so we're gonna move on to the discussion portion of our evening. We did. I actually have an item. I need to step back. And I didn't tell you about this, but this is not a dramatic surprise. I have an NSSED meeting on the 19th, which is, I believe, in 2 Wednesdays. My wife got an award for work, and there's some kind of dinner thing, and she's like, you really need to make a show at one of these meetings once in a while. And so I have to be arm candy for an evening, and I need somebody to step in and be an NSSED board rep on the evening of Wednesday the 19th. If somebody can,
I can do it.
Is that Wednesday the 19th? I just want to make sure that I got that date right.
Yeah, I'm out of town. I would do it, but I'm out of town.
Yeah, it's Wednesday the 19th, so if you can do it, that would be a huge help. So that's my request. Thank you.
Did
All right.
my wife pay you?
Yeah.
She sort of pays me in general.
She called, there were some threat now.
Okay, so then we'll move on to the discussion, and we begin with a facility update from our architect, Craig Seacup from White and Associates, White and Company.
So before, as Jim and Tom come up to the podium, and it's so nice to see you guys, can I tell you, I really think we should be charging for tours because we'd be able to pay for all this work that we're talking about. But
Apologize for the inconvenience. But it's a good
not an
inconvenience.
inconvenience, I have to tell you, I think it makes everyone in the school feel very special. And everyone that tours the building just continues to be wowed. But tonight what we need to do, and all of you should have handouts in front of you. Craig and Tom are going to go through the remaining work that needs to be done in both buildings. There are a couple things that need to be done this summer. One of them being, now I'm going to show my lack of knowledge in this area, but there's something to do with the boiler at middle school that Steve said we have to do to protect it so the whole boiler doesn't go down. Some things like that. Acoustics in the building have to be done this summer. There's other things that we can wait a summer. Keeping in mind that once these 2 summers are over with, to budget out over 2 years, we're ready for our 20-year facility plan, which is wonderful. I mean, we'll have 2 relatively new buildings. We can plan for boilers, we can plan for any roof replacements, etc. Before we get into this, because I think it's important to note, we've had many unexpected expenses this year. Personnel-wise, building-wise, etc. And so Jay will be bringing an amended budget for your review and approval in May. And we've done that probably at least half of the years that I've been here in district. That we're required to do that if we have to move too much money around. At the same time, he will be bringing you, based upon tonight, a tentative budget for next year. So whatever we decide for tonight, kind of in general for dollars, he will make sure it gets into the budget. And Jay's been part of these conversations as far as what he thinks we can get in the budget and can afford, etc. So with that in mind, know that we're going to be doing both amended and the new tentative budget next month. Jay's already working on those items. And I'm going to turn it over to Craig and to Tom. You've got this beautiful IHC list divided up over 2 summers, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Dr. Sophie, thank you very much. Pretty straightforward list. Let me backtrack. Over the last few months, we've been kind of wrapping up the punch list items. We are a stone's throw away from kind of completing all of those things. There's a couple of items that needed, the building to be vacated for, and that's happening at the beginning of summer that we're finishing up, and that's really the finishing. Specifically, I'm thinking about the finishing of the presentation stairs and getting that to the sheen that we had specified. So couldn't do it while the kids were in school because it's messy business. And we'll get that taken care of. In conjunction with that, we've also met on a number of occasions with Dr. Sophie and her trusted advisors, kind of taking a look, making sure things are operating and functioning the right way, as expected, and really kind of scrutinizing the building. We call it sort of a post-occupancy evaluation, I guess, if you will, when we come out here, always looking at things. In the course of those conversations, we've had the opportunity of kind of going back to the very beginning when we were really scrutinizing the budget and aligning the budget with the work scope and the desired work scope by the district. So there's a number of things that the group came up with to, I guess if you will, put a punctuation mark on the project. And those list of items are what is shown under the column description in the sheet that you have before you. And really it's broken up, as Dr. Sophie said, into two parts: summer of 2017 this summer, and then the next summer, which is 2018. Primarily the items that you see that we're recommending you consider for this summer are more performance related items and more functional kind of characteristics. And then summer 2018 more or less tend to be sort of the cosmetic, some of the cosmetic things that really would kind of wrap up the entire refurbishment of the school up in one whole big bundle. Going down the items for this summer, there are a few things. Some of them are items that, as we said, that kind of got deferred way back when at the beginning of the project, when there were other priorities and other issues and items that needed to be addressed. Some of them are items that just have recently come up for the district to consider and things that needed to get taken care of. And certainly just, as I said, post-occupancy items that really go to the performance characteristics of some of the spaces now that the district has moved in and kind of understands how to use the spaces and how it affects the curriculum that we're looking at making some adjustments. And starting things off, probably number one on this list would be the replacement of the bulbs in the ballast in the existing classrooms, where the lighting that we didn't touch, and that was in regards in respect to some issues that your students potentially might have as they graduate, matriculate to this particular facility. We did a pretty extensive study with our engineer and was able to determine that we can keep the fixtures themselves in place, which is really great, a huge savings for you, by simply taking out the ballast and replacing the bulbs. And so that cost is really reflected right over here. Going down the list and not spending too much time, I'll let you answer whatever questions though. The shades and for the classrooms and the rest of the facility that we
Shades also go with the
lighting.
issues with the students, so
Yep.
that really is paired up with the bulbs and ballast.
And then doing some wall treatments for the LRC and the dining to help some of the reverberation issues that we're experiencing, or that the students are experiencing in that particular part of the facility. Acoustic panels in the art room, cubbies, those are things that were kind of value engineered out earlier on of the project to help us align the budget. And then a couple items that not necessarily related to this facility, but your elementary school facility. That would be a conversion of one of the rooms, a storage room, into a mother's room, which, if you remember, we have at the middle school level, and has received an overwhelmingly positive response. So much so that the folks over at the elementary school have requested that we consider that for their staff. There's also a wall replacement. Or addition. You have two classrooms. One of them is an art room that's sort of like a double room at the elementary school. Looks like it was made for some kind of wall or folding wall at some future date. We did pop our head above there, find some structure, and we think with a little bit of care and inclusion of a folding wall, we can get that in there without too much angst, thereby increasing hopefully the capacity, adding some additional instructional space and increasing the capacity of your school. I understand that you're kind of
We're pretty squished.
squished there is a great word. Yep. And then,
So basically it's divided out. What we tried to do is take what has to be done this summer, even though I will tell you one of my personal preferences would be to get the older classrooms at the middle school done. There were other things that have to be done this summer, priority-wise, so we would get to them the following summer. But as you remember, especially Leanne and Mark, jump in, because you guys were part of the decisions where we had to cut back on some of the stuff. We still have to finish making the bathrooms nice at the middle school. Some things were replaced the year that I came in, some things were not. We have the locker room, which I've consistently heard about here. And I certainly want our middle school kids not to take showers because of the locker rooms. So we have two things at the elementary school that are going to be done, as Craig said, the mother's room. But the other piece, there's actually two things. The two art rooms, when you've been over there, do have space for this movable wall. If we ever had to make any last minute decisions in August to increase the section, we have nowhere to put them. So the ability of a folding wall to divide that room is a really nice thing that needs to be put in just in case. You never know about that. So when you look over this, and you've all toured the buildings, and probably the two of you may have the most in-depth knowledge, is there anything on there you have questions about?
Well, just a little edification on the numbers, as you might expect. That's the sort of thing I focus on. The bold type numbers, are those supposed to be summations?
Yes.
Yeah. So I couldn't get it all to add up. So why did you put sums on one side and not on the other, just to confuse us, or?
Sums on one side. Yeah.
Because 56 is the total of the top four numbers on the right-hand side, right?
Correct, 56,
And
which is
73.5?
the 73.5 then is the floor tile paint and lighting in those existing toilets. And then the 33,000 for the gym locker rooms is the floors and benches.
Okay.
Are we going to be asked to approve as we go, or are you going to want a commitment on both years? I mean, what's the process here?
I think we approve it just like we're going to approve it with bids. So we might do, isn't that the way we're going to do it? Where we do a group of bids and bring it to the board as we do groups?
So you're going to bid out, once you get our approval on 17, you'll bid it out and bring it back? Is that how it's going to work? Or?
Yeah, the only concern I have with the bidding process is just the timing of it. Here we are in April, and
Some of it we can use the existing contracts, right, or no?
Well, that is definitely an option that we can definitely do.
So would we pay, Jay, for some of this prior to the end of this fiscal year?
It's all
So
next
it's
year.
all next year. And you've got some things going on. I mean, we have a very tight budget this year, given our incremental expenses that we didn't expect. So
We
next
don't
year.
have money this year.
No, I know that. So next. Okay.
So related to what John was kind of saying, I think we should have said something up front to frame this a little bit for anybody viewing it and being critical of the district and the way we spend money, because if somebody got their hands on this and didn't know background, they're going to say, wait, we just spent $10 million on a new building and you guys are going to spend almost $600,000 more. What's going on?
Well, and that's for both buildings.
I know. And so, but I just want to frame it by saying, for the most part, we knew most of this was coming. We made specific decisions in the planning of the building to meet our budget early on, to put off some of the more cosmetic things to the future. There's a number of things on here that are painting existing classrooms, replacing countertops, replacing file cabinets. There's a lot of parts to the older, and I'm kind of talking to the camera here, to the older part of the building, the two remaining wings that really need to be spruced up to make it match the new building. And then there was a number of items that we would love to see in the new building that we just couldn't afford at the time, that we said we would work into capital budgets going forward. And so without increasing our budget in a way that will adversely affect the public, we're going to fit these things in, spread it out over time to make it work in our budget. And we're going to be just as careful in our budgeting process and keep our pencils just as sharp to make sure that this fits into our normal capital expenditures in these 2 years.
I want to get back to Phil's question though now. So basically we have two options. For the contracts that are not closed out, please correct me if I'm wrong in my understanding of this. For the contracts that aren't closed out, we could actually use the same contractors, which I'd prefer anyway because they've done the work in the building. Then we don't have to bid out, they're just finishing the project.
For this summer.
For this summer, anything that's done this summer and out of next year's budget. If a contract is closed out, however, then we're going to wind up having to bid it out again. That's my understanding. So,
And unless the option was to have IHC go ahead and do that as, say, a change order to our contract. And if that is something that's feasible.
So we're gonna, we're gonna have to
And
work
just
through
looking
all
at more
those.
ways to save time.
So can we, would it be too early to bid out 2018 to?
Oh, no, it's not too early to bid that out, no.
Alright.
We just, our first thing was to kind of get a feel from all of you, because it's still expense. I mean, it's expensive, but we need to be able to know the amount to put in the budget, and then we need to work through how we're gonna do it.
But can I just clarify something? But the 18 expenses would hit FY19, right? Okay, got it.
The summer of 18 will be the 18-19 budget.
I think we've determined that the items that we're recommending for this coming summer can be taken out of the contracts that you have in place in
Okay.
conjunction with IEC's contract. 2018 is when you want to bid those out. That would come later. We wouldn't bid that out right now. We're a little too early for that. But yes,
Yeah.
that would be the right thing to do.
And Jay, we've already levied for 17-18, right? And so this is all gonna work in our 17-18 levy and subsequent budget for that year,
Yes.
without having to dip in reserves?
Correct. Even given the bus transportation thing increase?
I haven't done the complete budget yet, but this was my estimate of what we could afford in terms of normal capital spending.
Plan
Yeah.
for this.
I
Plan
guess.
for this, yes.
I guess given some of our uncertainties, I'm just going to say that I think I'll feel confident going into the 17, but I think the 18 thing is going to have to be a decision that's.
Well, we don't have to commit to that.
I understand that, but I just there's even more money the second year
Is this
that you're looking to spend.
do we amortize this? You say capitalize. Do we amortize this? This expense?
School districts don't pay taxes, so there's really no benefit to amortization.
So we recognize the entire expense in the,
We actually have two sets of books. We have a government-wide set of financial statements where we do amortize it because we're trying to emulate normal corporate financial statements for the constituency that, like bond lenders and things like that, so that we can be apples to apples. But then we also have our fund financial statements where we recognize everything right away. So it's sort of both ways.
So yes.
So yes.
And no.
So I think that it's important acknowledging what Mark said. A lot of these things we knew we'd be bringing back up. In fact, I've been asked by a couple of you, when are we going to discuss this again? So we're discussing it. We're bringing it before you. You'll see it in the budget next month. I think it's important that you know what those dollar amounts are now. And I certainly wanted to bring it in front of you to see if you had any concerns or questions. Is there an area we missed? I think that as part of this, when we talk about the replacing the bulbs and the ballasts and doing the shades, that goes along with the student issue that I've kind of kept you all informed of. Then we get it all done, and it goes along with everything at the same time. But I need to know from all of you if you have any other concerns, questions. Obviously, the second year, it's a whole year away. We don't know where we're going to be with that.
I do have a question about the acoustic treatment, which is a $60,000 expense. Is that something that we anticipated needing, or what is that, and how did it arise?
Good question.
So it's kind of a two-parter there. If you remember, we had some decorative wall panels on the walls on both ends of the
That we
library.
cut.
The tree walls?
The tree walls. Tom has made great efforts to secure pricing and kind of reach out to as many contractors. We kind of put that to rest when we really couldn't get what we thought was a reasonable and fair price for that. And we looked else. We kind of put that to bed. So we put that issue to bed. Kind of looking at it now, living in the space, kind of going through the space when there was kids in the building. I think part of the reason why we're looking at doing some acoustics panels in those spaces, on those walls over there, is just because of the amount of activity that's happening in the space. So the acoustic panels actually replaced the wood panels at a far greater or cheaper cost, less expensive cost than we were anticipating and receiving from contractors for those wood panels. So it goes to making that space a little bit quieter for the kids during the course of the day. And no, we did not anticipate that, knowing that we'd have to do something with those walls. We found that something with the acoustic wall treatment at a reasonable cost, we feel.
How much was it for the tree walls?
Oh, you don't want to know. Don't
even
That's
answer
that,
that.
okay.
I can tell you.
It was outrageous. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
A couple hundred.
Oh, is that right?
It was actually a little more than that.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was more than that.
Yeah, okay.
are there
We didn't entertain it for very long,
Right.
so.
It was,
Couldn't explain it.
Make 60 sound cheap.
Nate? I mean, are there a lot of noise complaints in that space? I mean, what's
There's definitely reverberation at peak usage. When we have students in the dining area, when we have students in the cafeteria, on the upper level, it can be difficult to hear if you've got a small group that you're working with. So to answer your question, yes, but we are really maximizing that space. Sometimes we have 1 or 2 math classes in the library at the same time as the lunches. Flow-wise, it works really well. And just because of the flexible seating and the countertop height bookcases, it's proven to be a really great space for collaborative work. I mentioned math classes because that's not a place that has typically been utilized by our math teachers, and they're there frequently. So yes, there's been some complaints, and hopefully that
is this a $60,000 problem? I take that as
Say
no.
that, that's for the board to decide.
I guess that's a tough one for me to answer. I can't answer it not knowing what the result is going to be.
Right.
The experts who study this suggest that this is going to be something that's going to make a big improvement.
Sure.
I think what we didn't contemplate, we were told, but we didn't contemplate, is that the new building has really changed the way many of our teachers teach.
Mhm.
So they're using that area in different ways than we've
Right.
ever used it before.
Well, it can't be that big of a problem if they're choosing to teach there. It's not a barrier for instruction.
focus of the entire school, no question about it. It is the hub
Yeah.
of activity.
So you feel like you've explored all of the options. This is what you recommend in terms of both effectiveness and price point.
Yeah.
This maximizes the outcome.
It does kind of double duty there, yeah.
Mhm.
All right.
Any other questions, comments? We're gonna go ahead and move forward. We'll keep you up to date on it. Obviously, you approve bills anyway, so you'll see it. We will let you know before we ever get to that point. But with your, and it's not a formal approval, with your knowledge, we're gonna go ahead and start work. You'll see it in the budget.
So this will come up
Somewhere.
for a vote at an action meeting.
We could do it for a formal vote if that's something you chose to do. You're gonna see it in the actual budget. You're gonna see a line item for it.
I think it's something we should vote on.
I'd be happy to do that. We'll do it
When
next
we
month
look
with
at
the
the rest
budget.
of the budget, I think it's something we gotta look at, in my opinion.
We'll tie it into the budget.
Separately from voting on a budget.
Mm-hmm.
You know what, we'll do that. We'll break it out. We'll have it with the budget next month.
Okay.
All right?
Any other comments, questions?
I have one quick one. What's going on with LED lighting for interior work?
What's going on?
That was the
Is that
Richard, that's
anything-
the replacing bulbs and ballast thing on here?
Oh, that is all LED.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
oh, I thought you were asking me to,
No.
what's going on in the field? That's a big question.
No, I just didn't realize the way the state was all
It's all
over.
been-
You know, it actually is getting to the point where you can't, more and more you can't even get fixtures that aren't LED, but they're, again, a lot cheaper than they used to be. It used to be $100 a bulb or whatever when they first came out, so.
Okay,
Any questions, comments?
thank you guys.
Thank you
It's good
both
to
for
see you
coming.
again.
And thanks.
Very good, thanks for having us.
Keep talking.
We'll see you.
All right, so now we're going to move on to item 6B, the end of year parent survey, which Dr. Sophie will give us some background on.
Yes, as you know, we have discussed doing an end of the year survey this year for our parents. And instead of purchasing a survey, which I've been doing some looking into, very costly, I don't think we need to do that. I would like to just put together a survey monkey. But what I'd like to know, because I've heard from many of you that you want to know how parents feel about certain issues. So I'm going to keep this very informal and just say, please email me what you'd like to hear from parents on, and I'll develop kind of a list that I'll bring to the board at the next meeting. And then I'll put together a survey from that and we'll send it out. Very informal. I do want to remind you that last year we surveyed about the LBMS musical. This year we'll be surveying about the LBMS sports. So that's already in the works, but this is a parent survey above and beyond that. So if there's things that you want to hear about from parents to help guide you in your decisions, now's the time to let me know what you want to hear from parents on.
Now or by email?
By email within the next 2 weeks.
Okay.
So I can put together my list.
Are you having two different surveys, one regarding athletics and then a
Yes.
general one?
Yes.
I know this gets into somewhat dicey territory, but one thing I've always thought would be helpful is to get feedback from the students on the teachers and or possibly use the parents as a conduit for that. Because I know my children have come home and they'll say, you know, Mrs. So-and-so uses this word to refer to us and I don't like that, or, you know, things like that. I'm not talking about using this for performance purposes or anything other than good feedback for the teachers, because the kids certainly have opinions and I think the teachers might be interested in those. Is that going to be a component of this, or is there a separate avenue for that? I guess maybe it's a question for Nate. What your reaction to
that is actually, it's a slippery slope because it could also become a union issue. So it's something that we can work through. We can certainly ask open-ended questions on that.
Mm-hmm.
That's how many districts do it, but it could very easily be a union issue and has been in other districts.
Maybe the way to approach it is on the Survey Monkey to have some sort of open-ended questions where if somebody had something on their mind, it'd be appropriate to share it there rather than about specific teachers. But I just think from the commentary I hear that the teachers would be interested to know some of these things.
Well, and I think the other thing, what I would predict, Julie, in this community, is if we had an open-ended question, I think many of our parents would have glowing things to say about certain teachers, and that gives us our ability to recognize those teachers. Certainly, if they had any concerns about teachers, that would be one way of us, you know, knowing what those concerns are and doing any follow-up that we could based upon that. So that's really the only way we could do that, unless we did some kind of mutual joint effort, and we could put that in our strategic plan as something to work with the teachers on.
Okay, well, I'll be interested to see what you come up with and make some suggestions
Well,
as well.
like I said, you all have homework.
Okay.
You know, remember you get those big salaries. So I need homework from all of you. I need you to email me things that would help you in making decisions. And remember that this is going to be a parent survey. So what do you need to know from parents to help guide us, not only in some of the decisions we make this way, but also in strategic planning, because we'll use it for that too.
Do you have any thoughts already about the types of questions that you're going to include?
No, because I'm going to bring it to admin team and find out what they would like to hear about. I will probably even ask the teachers union to go to their group and ask what do they want to be hearing about. So, you know, continuous feedback is very important for all of us to hear where concerns are and what people like that we're doing.
So it might be helpful, at least from the way my brain works, is to I build on what other people do, so you get some ideas of what you're hearing from the other groups to share that with us, and it would also serve as a reminder. Oh, by the way, I need your questions, and here's what I'm hearing from other groups so far. That might be helpful to me.
When I start putting this together, I'll just send out lists for you guys, and I'll add to the list.
And I need this by this date.
Right. I'll remind you when they're all due.
Okay.
So that concludes that particular item.
So now so any other questions for Jean on that end of the year parents survey? So we'll let Jean continue with strategic planning revision discussion.
As I have shared, I am running about 2 months behind on our proposed process due to some personnel issues and other district issues that I have been working through. So beginning in May, I want to put our strategic planning groups together and send out invites for participation. Several of you have sent people to sit on these very important committees, and again, I want to remind you, they're all in files, so if you have not sent me people, now's the time to let me know. Please consider who you believe could help us through this process. We will be hosting parent focus groups in May. That's important. We will have a morning, an afternoon, and an evening parent focus groups. So I want you to picture this. We've got my listening tour feedback, verbal feedback from teachers that I'll be sharing with all of you. We will have the parent focus groups. We will have the parent end of the year survey. We will be looking at gathering feedback from kids, because I think that's an important piece, not only in our school district now, but probably going to the high school and getting some feedback from students there. And then to pull all of this together, we've got to do something for the community to access their feedback over the summer. And then my goal would be to convene the strategic planning group in September after school gets out, review all of this feedback that I'm talking to you about, review and revise our existing strategic plan in 2 to 3 sessions. The listening tour data, parent focus group, end of the year surveys, community surveys, and any other information will be shared with that group to kick it off. And then we'll be making those revisions.
So Jean, if somebody wanted to be involved in strategic planning from the community, who would they contact and how would they do that?
They should contact me at jsophie@lb65.org, and I have had about 5 parents contact me because it was in one of my parent newsletters, so I'll be putting it back in that again also. But even more importantly, we need people to represent the entire community. So, as John reminds us all the time, John is a very valuable asset because he's a senior without children in the district and really presents a whole different aspect. So, and for other reasons.
Thank you. Comic relief, not among the least of those things.
But, we really have to think about that group. In fact, I'm thinking about going to the preschools. We need to get parents that are going to be new parents that don't have their kids in the district. So maybe I'll go to Lake Forest Hospital. Give them our information and say any parents that have kids that are going to go to our district, have them contact me. Those people are very important to be involved because their kids will be part of the process.
Should we assume or not assume that existing volunteers of PTO and Alliance will be consulted as
They will all be. They will.
As part of, so I should just not worry about any of those people.
What we've done in the past is I've opened it, but I specifically request that their current leaders take part in it.
Okay.
I think that's really important. We will not turn people away because certainly any feedback and input that we get will be valuable to all of us. So, but instead of starting this in May or doing these groups in May, we're pushed back to September now with the way things have gone.
You had to do what you had to do,
So.
Okay. Any other questions about that?
That's exciting.
Send me names. I have yours. Phil sent me some.
All right.
So.
And if anybody would like to be part of that, please don't hesitate to reach out to Dr. Sophie. Now we're going to move on to item D on our discussion list, which is a new waste disposal contract with Group. And Mr. Khan will take us through the details of that.
At the board meeting in April, the next meeting, we have to approve a 3-year contract with Group for waste and recycling services. We used to use Waste Management. Their contract expired on March 31st, and I sought competitive bids for the new term for the contract and received some from Group as well as Waste Management. Although we've had good service from Waste Management, Group it also comes well recommended, and their prices were competitive and were much lower considering they don't have any additional fees. Waste Management has, I think, 4 additional fees on top of the regular pickup charges that added 20 to 30% to the bill. So we should see a savings going forward with Group, and we're looking to make that switch. Those of Lake Bluff currently uses Group, Lake Forest School Districts use Group, and both gave good recommendations. So I feel comfortable making the switch. the total value of the contract is below the threshold at which you need to approve it, but since it was a significant expense, we wanted to bring it for your approval anyway.
So we would bring this to the next board meeting for your approval.
And it's been reviewed by our attorneys and amended and set.
Do you know offhand the terms to, you said it's a 3-year contract?
It's written as a 33-month contract
Okay.
to align it to the calendar year.
And what, do you happen to know offhand the provision for getting out of it? I apologize, I didn't check myself for that.
It is, after 33 months, we can cancel at our convenience.
But we're locked in for 33 months.
Yeah.
And that we needed that to get the price.
Right.
Thanks.
I mean, there are provisions for canceling in terms of forced service and things like that, but otherwise, that's our.
The term clause says this contract will be for a period of 5 years.
Right, and then our attorneys added an amendment which supersedes that.
Okay.
They had their kind of boilerplate that they gave us, and so I read through it, and our attorneys changed the terms basically.
We bring all our contracts through Hodges before we bring them here.
Okay, looks good.
Anybody else? All right, so we're going to move on to our final discussion item, which is the Washington, D.C. field trip. And Mr. Blackburn is going to give us an update on that.
So when we last met, you had some very good questions for me, some questions that I wasn't able to answer with regard to parent perception about the trip. And so we went ahead and surveyed our current 7th and 6th grade parents. And so in your board packet, you have the results of that survey and some data. Generally speaking, the results were very positive and very supportive of the trip. It was interesting to me to know when we were surveying 7th and 6th grade parents to see that we actually had over half who had experience with older siblings who had gone on the trip. So we were getting feedback from people who had direct experience as well as feedback from parents who hadn't yet gone on the trip. So I don't know if you have any questions for me based on what was in the board packet, but this was able, I think, to answer some of those questions that you asked.
I actually think it made very clear. I was wondering what parents thought of it. So it made very clear to me that this was a trip that we will keep doing. It's very important.
We've probably discussed this before. Can you refresh my memory on what the liability, how we address the potential liability issues on a trip like this?
Do you need Jay to take over for that?
Perhaps, Jay, you want to
Well,
Thank you, Jay.
I mean, our chaperones and things like that, steps that we take to try to prevent anything from happening. But in terms of protecting the district, should anything happen, we have insurance coverage through CLIC.
And it covers everything from accidents to other sorts of things
Right.
that might happen.
Exactly. Very extensive coverage. It's a cooperative of 150 school districts, and it's designed for all the activities that school districts.
Do the kids sign a waiver of any sort?
There's a permission slip. They sign all of the documents are done and coordinated with Hemisphere Educational Travel. That includes health information. That includes airfare. I don't know that you would consider it a waiver, but it's parents granting permission for the students to go on that trip if they were to become ill, offering us permission to administer medication if that's the case, and receive medical treatment in case of emergency. Those sorts of documents.
Our law firm would tell us any waivers for things like that aren't that meaningful anyway. I'm going to tell you that right now for field trips. So, I mean, we do our best. We're insured through CLIC. I think any parent that's watching, I want to remind them that our board policy is very clear that any trips overnight or out of state must be approved by the board prior to going. So,
I guess my only question on this is, I know last time we discussed this, this does seem to take quite a bit of staff time to put together. And although the feedback is overwhelming in support of the trip, I just want to know what your thoughts are on whether or not that's still something that we should be pursuing or thinking about implementing at some point due to the amount of time it does take.
Yes, I think so. It's a unique opportunity to see the things and experience the things that you can try to simulate in the classroom, but really it's difficult to do. I think certainly the connection that you build with kids, the experience that they have traveling together, some of them, in some cases, being away from home for the first time, in some cases being on a plane for the first time. I see great value in it. You're correct, it does take a lot of time and commitment. I would say that many of my counterparts in other school districts, this trip has been canceled, sometimes for liability concerns, or sometimes because the board doesn't feel that it's valuable, or sometimes because of participation. We have high participation, we have positive response, but more often than that, it's that they don't have staff who are willing to do it. And we have a list of people and people who want to go that aren't able to go because we're limited to the number of chaperones we can bring. I bring that up because that's a really positive thing about our staff. I think it speaks to their commitment.
It's a good problem to have.
It is.
Right?
It's a great problem to have, but the other side of that, as Mark and John can tell you from bargaining the teacher contract, we pay stipends for quite a few things that the staff does for that trip. So there are other expenses other than going on the trip.
It is.
Does that make sense? You know,
Well, I
planning
think the point
expenses.
too is, yeah, I'm sure they're enthusiastic about it, but presumably they could be enthusiastic about doing other things related to education. And I guess my question is it still worth looking at just having us get out of this business? Still doing the trip, but just out of the organization side of this.
You know, certainly if that's the directive you want, we would certainly look at it. There was definitely some strong commentary in the comment section in opposition to that. Parents very concerned about turning it over to people that they don't necessarily know or trust. People concerned about, I was surprised by that. I was surprised to see how many folks, in addition to the comments, picked up the phone to call and say, hey Nate, what's the reality of this trip going away? Because I want to know, do I need to come to the next board meeting? Do I need to voice my concerns or my support for it? And I said, well, I'll be presenting it at our next meeting. Feel free to take a look at it, presenting the results. But yeah, generally speaking, there wasn't a lot of positive feedback on the idea of turning it over to a private. If you look on the last question there, the three sort of options parents were presented with, it was keep the trip the same, 84.5% wanted that, make the trip a non-school sponsored trip, 8.7%, eliminate the trip altogether, 6.8%. So,
I think, oh, I'm sorry.
go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think this is a healthy dialogue to have. It's the most candid conversation we as a board have had since I got on the board about the trip and the right place for it in the curriculum. But I think the community has spoken, and you know, I think we continue to talk about it. But for now, I'd say the die's been cast and that we keep going with it.
Well, and I'm going to flip it around back to the end of the year survey and remind everybody that this was something you guys wanted to hear from the community in. Think to yourselves about what other parts of our school system you want to hear from parents on, because I was surprised at the results of it. I thought we'd get more of a 50-50 mixed feeling, and we did not get that. So, you know, I think that is an important piece that everybody kind of needs to keep in mind.
The thing I'd like to highlight is something we talked about briefly last time that we haven't talked about yet here, is the financial side and the burden this places on some people. And a cursory look at this data would suggest that the money's not really a problem, but if you aggregate a few numbers, for example, I am comfortable spending $1,065 to allow my child the opportunity to participate in the Washington, D.C. trip. And if you take the bottom three responses, you know, the strongly disagree, which is a 5, and then whatever the next level, 4 and 3. Some of the people are neutral all the way down to strongly. That's over 20% of the people.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fifth. That's a big number of people who are wavering on the cost. Then if you take the more direct question, if financial assistance were available, I would consider applying. Almost a third say I strongly agree, or number 2 or number 3, the next 2 levels down. 31%. That's a lot of people who this is not so easy. So I would just encourage us to continue to pursue ways of helping people make this trip affordable, to not be embarrassed to apply for that financial aid, and to seek support from some of our donor groups to help us fund that. Because I think if we do this, every kid deserves to go, and no family should feel that this is impinging on their ability to provide the basics for their family.
I actually, one of the big pluses for publicizing these meetings is I did get an email from a community member who is hooking me up with some other group that gives money for things like this because they heard the discussion. So I do think we need to look for alternative revenue, and I do think our two parent groups need to be aware of the situation, because right now the way our field trip policy is written and it's part of our curriculum, every child deserves to go.
Yeah.
So it is a financial responsibility that our district has, and I would reiterate what you said. I would just encourage parents, if they need help, to apply.
Those aren't small numbers.
So they are not small numbers.
Well, I've heard comments about this trip in both directions. Never heard anybody complain about the trip itself, but just the concern about the finances of it. I agree with Mark. I think, the numbers that we have support keeping it, but it concerns me that it's a hardship for 20% or more of the people that answered. And I also think that when we do our policy work, this is something we have to look at in terms of student safety. Because right now this trip is done in a way that subs out. We take their phones away. We allow them to bring phones. We take them away and then have them chaperoned by people we don't know. So I think there's an aspect of this that still needs to get looked at for student safety.
Chaperoned by people we
Yeah,
don't know.
Talking about
We-
the security at
We
night.
hire security at night when they're in the hotel rooms.
They don't interact with the students. If anyone needs assistance, comes out, their job is to be my eyes and ears. They don't interact with kids. If anyone were to come out of the room, they call me.
They call.
Yep, that's
And
fine.
I appreciate that, and
Yeah.
it's worked, as far as I know, it's worked fine to date. I just think that as we review policies, this is something that we need to keep in mind.
And there's a renewed
And you will be at that
sensitivity to
meeting
those
Happy
as
kinds
a
to.
of-
principal.
Happy to be.
Okay, any further discussion on the Washington DC field trip? So we are going to end our discussion and move on to item number 7, the opportunity. Thank you, Mr. Blackburn, appreciate it. Move on to item number 7, which is public comment. If anybody would like to address the board, I have a request here from Mr. Moss.
I learned a valuable lesson tonight to listen to the whole agenda before I speak. From my former school, many of these issues were in play then. I almost have a comment on every spot on the agenda, but I won't. February 14th, I came and spoke to you in a very formal manner with a script. In March, I came to you in a more comfortable manner because I was presenting analysis I had done, and that's what I do in my day-to-day job, is analysis. Tonight, I'm going to go back to a little bit of an uncomfortable zone and try and speak to you from the heart, because I think that's what we need. We got too much formality, we got too much slowness, we got too much following the rules, doing it this way, and it's not progressing, either with the speed or the substance that we need it to. The petition was referenced tonight. We put that forward to you. I think we became aware of it in January. We formally presented it in February. I remind you, though, that followed, that this issue's been out there since early June of 2016. The victim group spent a lot of time working on a lot of issues, some very personal. Many of us spent a lot of time dealing with law enforcement. We always knew the school and the response from the school was going to be an important part of the process. I put a lot of confidence in my school that I wouldn't need to provide the prompting and that providing to get this process moving along. I was very encouraged tonight to hear that the policy group is meeting, and it sounds like that's going to be taken very seriously. That's a very encouraging development. But still, that sounds like it'll take place nearly 1 year after this issue came forward. That's a long time in victim's eyes. Remember, all the victims are former students of Lake Bluff School. They're all looking on this school with fondness. They want to continue to look upon it with fondness, and they want to look upon it as a source of something they can be proud of. There are some people who are starting to lose pride in their school. That might be some of the smallest personal loss they've had as a result of all this. We need to find a way to move this process faster and with more substance. I don't know what that is. I've seen other government units in Lake Bluff, when they come across a problem, they form a task force that combines board members and community members more formally. It might be a resource issue. I've listened to the agenda tonight. You guys are all citizens in this town just like I am. You all have individual lives just like I do. I appreciate all the time and service you give to the school board. This might be a resource issue. We might need to look for some path to get more resource. Dr. Sophie, you must be tired of responding to my FOIA requests. I am absolutely fatigued at having to provide them. But as I mentioned to you early on in the process, I do respect the Open Meetings Act, and I'm trying to follow those rules. I realize the only time I have, or a victim has, to talk to you in a formal way is in this setting. You can't really respond to me. You can't respond to me prior to, and you can't respond to me tonight. We must find a way to navigate around that. If we can't get connection, to get ideas on the table, to get substance on top of the form, to get some corrective action in place, we're going to be like most of the other schools. Most of the other schools have failed. We try to point out some examples for some schools that we think eventually responded well. One particular issue, and then I'll stop. In March, at the March meeting, I briefly mentioned that you would want to take a look at your bus stops on the East Terrace. I waited a period of time. I knew spring break was in there, so I waited till after spring break. That gave 3 weeks after the meeting. The same bus was stopping at the same stop. This is literally what I did. I just
Jim?
shook my head. I couldn't believe I was seeing this.
Can I address that?
Yes, you can.
That stop is across the street from my house.
Okay.
That's been an issue that there's 26 kids
Mhm.
on Lincoln Avenue in the terraces. That's been an issue that every household with children and those without children knows about. We've been contacted, we've been contacted by the police, but with this issue, we've been contacted by the school district. They've talked to every kid that gets picked up in front of my house. And we all agreed as parents that they're safer getting picked up where they are than moving it further away. I'm just speaking as a parent, I'm not speaking as a school board member right now, but I understand why you think that no change has been made. But the district has contacted me as a parent, not as a school board member,
Mhm.
and they've also contacted all my neighbors. We discussed the issue as neighbors, and we went back to the school district and said, appreciate what you're doing, we know why they're doing it, but we simply asked them to keep the stop where it is, because we feel like our kids are safer getting picked up where we can see them rather than moving them to the opposite end of the block of the terraces, which are very long blocks where they're out of view. So that's the answer to that particular question.
I actually love hearing that answer. And again, though, it's frustrating to have to come to this type of dialogue to get that input. I'm concerned as well. And I'm in a business where we have to run a lot of policies. I'm in a very regulated business. And I know it doesn't matter what you write in your policies, it's what you do. And what you just described is what we do. And you want to do what you say and say what you do. In that manner, it's more important to do the right thing and to get more to the substance of the policy, which is the protection of children. I don't know why then when I responded in asking for an update, I didn't get that response. I got the school bus company takes care of that issue. And that was completely alarming, that we'd taken a child safety issue, and at least the response I got indicated it had been turned over to some other outside party that I don't think should have our child safety as priority one. So I'm glad to hear that happens. That's exactly the example I'm looking at. That was just a short interchange. If we could just have some forum, to have some dialogue, some exchange, some ideas, all the people that are behind me that are feeding me ideas for what they see other schools are doing, what schools can do, we have to find a way to move this along. I'm not saying we ignore the rules. I'm not saying we just ignore Open Meetings Act. We just have to find a way to have a more constructive dialogue. I have approached you on behalf of others, and nobody's here to beat up the process. They just want to improve it. None of us thought that there were no policies in place. We just thought the policies were in place, could be strengthened. We're hopeful that somehow some resources can be employed here to make that process happen faster. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thank you.
Jim. Jim, while you're walking away, I also wanted to do one other clarification for you. Our policy committee met, and I don't know the exact date, but it was the Monday after Christmas break. It was a very long policy meeting, trust me. But at that meeting, we actually looked at several of our policies and tightened them up at that meeting because of everything that's going on. I think we had a different eye on our policy. I'll give you, for instance, one of the policies was in regards to teacher communication with students. And when teachers have communication with students outside of school, parents need to be copied if it's a social media. So I can tell you that we've been doing our work long before this policy committee meeting. We did a lot of policy changes and had things rewritten after that meeting, and then approved first read at the January regular meeting and then final approval at the second. So we've been on it. But we are going to really take it to a whole new level at this next meeting. I think that's important to know.
Can I add one other thing? I guess one of the reasons why I asked the questions I did about this DC trip, as an example, is one of the responses we heard from the administration was, and that our parents said, these are people that we trust. You know, nothing wrong will happen. Well, I think we know from experience and research that the things that happen are from people that we trust. And so I think it's a responsibility of the board, and why I'm maybe the outlier on this particular meeting, why I'm asking tougher questions, is just because parents want it doesn't necessarily mean it's always a thing for the board to endorse. And so I understand we're going to move forward in the way that we are, and I think it would create a lot of short-term problems if we decided to move this out of the school district. But I do think that we have a responsibility, especially in light of what we've dealt with this past year, to question these things. So that's the spirit. I mean, you're having an effect on how people think about these things. So that's all I have to say.
Thanks. All right, so it is now 8:02 p.m. Our public portion of our meeting is coming to a close. We do have some business we have to attend to in closed session. And so we're going to have to ask to clear the house because we have to do it in private. We're going to do it up here. So we'll go and close this. No, we don't adjourn because we're going to go into closed session.
You have to adjourn this meeting,
Oh,
and
okay.
then we go into.
All right, so at 8:10 p.m. may I have a motion to adjourn the open session of this meeting?
So moved.
Second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. We are out of open session.